Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Health Span podcast. I am your host, Nicole Parmley. I am the health and fitness coach for Evolved Women's Health located in Springville, Utah. Today's episode is about burnout. It is a topic I've been covering a lot lately. Because I think it's really important. I feel like 2026 has hit us all pretty hard. And I think addressing burnout is something that is important for a women's health clinic to do because it is especially prevalent in women. So today we're kind of talking about it from the aspect that burnout may not actually be entirely from your workload. There is no doubt that women are burned out because they are doing too much. That is definitely true. But it is not the full picture. Because if women were doing a lot of things that were actually important to them, their capacity would look really, really different. We would still get tired, sure. There's no way around that, right? But we would not feel as depleted or as resentful or as disconnected as so many of us do. And I think a lot fewer of us would actually be medicated for things like depression and like anxiety. The real problem is that we are doing too much and that a large percentage of what we are doing is not actually ours to do. Okay? We are doing things that other people should be doing. And we're also not doing things that are actually important to us because we spend so much time and energy putting other people first. So if we were just doing one or two things that we didn't enjoy, it really wouldn't be a problem. That's life, right? Like you have to do some things you don't enjoy. There kind of is this, one day we can talk about it, but this idea of, well, why are you doing this thing that you don't enjoy? Are you doing it because you feel guilty if you don't do this thing? Or are you doing this thing you don't enjoy because it is part of something you do enjoy? So for example, I'll give you mine, right? I hate social media. I do. I hate it so much. I hate doing social media. I hate being on social media, but it is part of my job to do it. And I do it because I love helping women. So it's like, yes, I can deal with it a little bit better because I'm doing this thing that I do not like in the pursuit of something that I do that is important to me. Whereas something like going and helping out at craft day at my children's school, I hate doing. I'm not crafty. Okay, also not a big fan of schools. Anyway, I hate doing that. And the only reason I ever did it was out of a sense of obligation or guilt. Okay, so I hope you see that there are like two different things, and we can talk more about it later. But if we were just doing a couple things that we did not enjoy, we wouldn't be as depleted. Okay, we could tolerate that. We're tough. We can do hard things, right? But that is not the reality. That is not what is happening. What is happening is that most of our time and our energy and our attention is going toward things that we were taught we should value. Okay, we have been taught that we need to be available, we need to be accommodating, we need to be thoughtful, be selfless, be everything to everyone, because that is what good girls do. And over time, this stops feeling like a choice. I honestly can't remember the last time it felt like a choice. Okay, I've developed this mindset over the course of probably the last 2.5 years. But most of my life, it didn't even cross my mind that I could choose to do or not do things. That if someone asked, it was my obligation to do it. That if my children had a party at school, it was my obligation to be involved in that. So it really, I remember the time when it just felt like who I was. And I kept saying yes. And I kept showing up. And I kept doing what was expected. And my workload just went up and up and up and up. And so then here I was just doing too much. And a lot of what I'm doing was not actually mine to do. Okay, and it wasn't important to me. And that created burnout over and over and over again, right? It wasn't even just like one burnout accompanied by an epiphany and then everything was fine. Like I just kept repeating this cycle. And I know I'm not alone because I've talked to so many women who are in it, who are in the cycle. And it's like you can't even see it until someone is like, hey, have you noticed? And then they're like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, I know. So this is not just a time management problem, ladies. It's also not just a capacity problem. Like the last podcast, I think it was the last one, I talked about the capacity problem. That is a problem and it does exist and it has to be addressed, right? That overfunctioning. But what I'm talking about today is actually an alignment problem because you are spending your life maintaining standards that were never actually yours. I did it. So many women I know do it. So let me say that again. You are spending your life, your time, your energy, your resources, maintaining standards that were never actually yours. They were imposed on you, they were taught to you, but you never had a say in whether they were actually yours. So if that's the pattern, the question is not, how do I do less? Not completely. It definitely can be. See last podcast. Okay. I also have them on my blogs at the Evolved Women's Health website. But the question here is, why am I doing so much that isn't actually important to me? Why am I taking on other people's responsibilities? And this is where so many of us get stuck because we are not taught how to answer that question. We're taught how to be good. We're taught how to meet expectations. We're taught how to be liked, dependable, and easy to rely on. But we are not taught and not allowed to in many, many cases. I know I wasn't. I grew up in a very traditional Christian religion. We are not taught or even allowed to define what actually matters to us as individuals. So instead of building a life based on our own values, we build an entire life based on what we were told to value. And over time, that becomes our identity, but there's cognitive dissonance and there's emotional tension because that assumed identity, that taught identity, that imposed identity exists not because it's true anymore, but because it's familiar. And the thought of breaking out of that and pursuing your own values, determining your own values and pursuing your own tasks and projects is suddenly very scary because of the social blowback that you are very likely to encounter. I'm not going to lie and say that, oh, it's perceived, it's not real. No, it's very real. And it's a very, very scary thing to do. But I believe it is also very scary to live a life that is not actually yours. So I'll give you a very real personal example. So I grew up I grew up Mormon, and in the young women's program, the youth, like there every Sunday, and I think between like every meeting, I think we even did it on Wednesdays when we had like our youth classes. So there was like normal church on Sunday and then like youth classes on Wednesday. We would repeat this God, I can't even remember what they called it anymore. It was just like we would repeat this passage. And part of the passage was a set of values that they gave us. It was faith, divine nature, individual worth, knowledge, choice and accountability, good works, and integrity. Y'all, I am 42. I did that as a teenager, and I can still recite that. Okay, and for a long time, I believed those were my values, not because I chose them, but because I never questioned them, because I was never allowed to question them. If you questioned them, there was something wrong with you. And over time, there was this horrible underlying tension. And I was not happy. And in my early 30s, I just found myself so miserable. Because I hadn't been living my life. And I didn't know what my values were. But I didn't like what was happening to me. So that tension that I'm talking about, it has a name. And it's called cognitive dissonance. And it is what happens when how you're living does not match what is actually true for you internally. And you can function in that space for a very long time. But it is incredibly stressful and really horrible. Like it just feels awful. And eventually it shows up as just like a blow up, right? Or a burnout. And then everybody thinks you're crazy, right? And they want to medicate you. It's like, no, I've just been living in cognitive dissonance for 30 years. Okay. And this part of the conversation is where it starts to get uncomfortable. Okay. We've talked about cognitive dissonance. We've talked about what it does. And now we're going to talk about what we do. And it is going to be uncomfortable because there are things that we are told should matter, that are socially expected to matter, that don't. So for me, one of these things is social connection. Okay, and just like hang with me here. Like we are taught that, especially as women, right, that we're supposed to host parties, that we're supposed to plan vacations, that we're supposed to be highly involved in our churches and our schools and yada, 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 that we have to be socially involved all the time. Okay? And I truly do care about people. And I do truly enjoy meaningful conversation. But I detest hosting. I do not enjoy feeling responsible for everyone else's experience. I do not enjoy the pressure of making sure everyone is having a good time. And I'm going to be super honest here. I don't especially enjoy the pressure to clean my house so that it is perfect and socially acceptable, and I don't feel guilty about the fact that me and two boys live there. Like, I don't like that. I don't want to do it. Okay? But it took me such a long time to accept that. I thought there was something wrong about myself or something wrong with me, and I thought, oh, I need to start hosting, and like that. I always just kind of let that hang there. Like, if someone invited me to their home, like I should reciprocate. And I was finally like, you know what? I don't. I don't. So I couldn't make myself enjoy that. Not because connection is the problem, but because that version of connection that I had been modeled and I had been trained to do was not mine. And when I kept forcing it, it drained me physically and mentally and emotionally because I wasn't showing up. I like as my authentic self, I was performing the entire time. And once I saw that, I started seeing it everywhere. And motherhood was another place that this showed up, this forced values, this performance based on false values, I guess is another way we can say it. And specifically, the school mom role. You know what I'm talking about. The read to your kid days, the class parties, the room mom responsibilities, like driving to field trips and chaperoning field trips and yada, 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 and on and on and on. And I believed being a good mom meant being involved in everything. So I said yes over and over and over and over and over. And I hated it and I was tired and I'd go and I would do the Christmas party. But then I was so depleted, I couldn't actually enjoy my children who were the ones I was doing it for, right? That's what I said. Oh, I'm doing it for my kids. My kids would have had a better time if a mom who super loved doing parties was the one in charge of it and they got to come home to me and I had energy to play with them and love on them instead of being shot for the rest of the day. And that's the part that a lot of women don't say out loud because they're like, oh my God, it makes me such a bad person. And I think a lot of us like don't even want to admit it to ourselves. That I don't want to be a room mom. I don't want to. I want to do something else. Right? And we burnout does not come from not caring. It comes from caring about the things that were never important to you. It comes from pretending to care about things that you don't care about. And it comes from this constant performance. So at some point, I stopped asking what should matter to me and I started asking what actually does. And I had to learn how to do this. I could not even begin to figure out how to find my own values. I was like, what does that even mean? Like, what are you talking about? And a little bit later in the podcast, I'm going to tell you what my process was and how I learned to do it. And maybe it can help you on your way. But we'll get to that in a minute. After I spent some time with this process, I landed on 3 core values that were actually mine. They were growth, and health and family. And even with all 3 of those, there was one that stood out very clearly, and that was growth. And I've realized that this is why I live in like #hard mode, because I really do enjoy challenge and I really do enjoy growth. And I'm not one of those people who ever would have done well with the white picket fence. I didn't want something stagnant. And that was really weird. Like realizing, oh, like I'm like there's a method to my madness. There's a reason people think I'm intense and crazy. It's because I'm growth oriented. I'm driven by becoming. I'm driven to do hard things. I'm driven to learn and evolve and expand. And then the other 2 values I talked about, health and family, they both support that. Like I'm constantly increasing my knowledge in health, right? I'm growing as a health professional, as a fitness professional. And I'm also always kind of like digging deeper into my own health and, digging deeper into fitness and trying to accomplish something new. Like growth informs health, right? And then family, I'm also I'm all about growth in my family as well. And I don't mean having more kids. I mean, wanting to help my kids develop certain skills and figuring out a way I can coach them. into those skills without sitting down and being like, son, you need to learn how to be tougher. Like, that's lame. Like, let me give him experiences that help him develop that, right? And so growth is this overarching value of mine, and it informs the other two really important ones of health and family. And once those things became clear, like once I was able to identify what my personal values were, decisions about how I was going to spend my time, my resources, my energy became easier because I had a filter. If something didn't align, it was way easier to say no. Not because I didn't care, but because it wasn't mine to carry. I'll kind of give you an example. I'll go back to the room mom thing, right? I did not want to do the Christmas party. I did not want to do the crafts. I did not want to read to kids. I read to kids at home. Like I read to my kids. Anyway, but one time they were going to go do hiking, and I love to hike. And so I was like, oh, me, I will drive and I will chaperone and it will just be the best. And you know what? It was. So I went and I fulfilled this family value by being there for my child, but I did it in a way that aligned with my other values as well. And it felt so good, and it actually rejuvenated me, and it was a really good memory for me and for my child, as well as for my child's friends. I think they had a really good time. And I even got to connect with other moms who also enjoyed hiking. And so it was like, oh, this is how that works. When I align what I am doing with what I actually value and what I enjoy, it doesn't feel like a chore, and I don't have contempt, and I am not drained. Like, it's actually a really wonderful experience. And that is what life can be like when we take the time to figure out what our values are, our values. So I promised you I was going to tell you what my process was. And I just want to go out there and say, this is not my process. I did not create this. I learned it. Okay. But that is also really great because that means that you also can learn it quite easily because it's not secret. It's out there, right? So if you have never defined your values, here's a place you can start. Okay. Write down everything that is currently taking your time and energy, right? And ask, is this actually mine to do? Okay. Because there are some tasks that we take on as women that are not ours to do. Okay. If you have a 16-year-old son who needs to register for the ACT, for example, there's no reason that child cannot register for the ACT. I know, you're just like, wait, what? Like, if you trust him, and I hope you do, right? I don't know your circumstance, but if it is a child who is trustworthy and he needs your credit card, like, just give him your credit card number and let him register himself or herself, whatever, for the ACT. You will be amazed at how very efficient they can be, right? At doing things that we, for some reason, think are ours. Or if you have a child who needs to register for classes, let them register for classes. Like, hang out in case they have a question or they need some help or something. But you don't have to do that. You can let them do it. So that's the first part, right? In protecting your time and your energy and your values, just be like, hey, what am I doing that isn't mine? And let me give that back to the person who that belongs to. You know, it could also be your spouse. You know, I don't know. I don't know what your circumstance is. But if it's not actually something you have to do, take it off your plate. Give it to the person that it belongs to. Okay? And then the other thing I would recommend, right, when you're defining the core values, is you can actually Google values. Okay, and you can get like enormous lists of like 75 values, right? And just kind of go through. There are going to be some that you just know right off are not yours, right? So you just cross those off, okay? And then you go back at a different time, I would never do this just sitting down all in one go, because you need time to digest and process, right? But like, try and get down to like a group of 10. Okay, 10 values that you're like, oh, I think that this speaks to me. And then on a different day, you go back into those 10 and you're like, okay, I'm going to whittle this down to 5. Okay. And then another day, you can go take it down to 3. You really should not have more than 3 values. And this is a process that can take as long as you need it to take, because there are going to be some things that you cross off your list that are actually really uncomfortable to cross off your list. Like, no one wants to be the person that crosses off friendship. No one wants to be that person. And no one wants to be the person that crosses off family. Like, it ended up not being one that I crossed off, but I have met people that is actually one that they crossed off. And that didn't mean that they didn't love their families. Okay, but it meant that there were some other values that were more important to them. And they could use those values in the way that they interacted with their family. So maybe like environmental stewardship was one of the values that made it. And maybe with your family, you go and you pick up trash along a river or something, right? So there is a good chance that you are going to have to cross some things off that make you uncomfortable, and you're going to have to sit with that, and you're going to have to process it, and you're going to have to be really honest with yourself about it. So that's why I'm always like, please don't do this in one go. Like, you will, if you do it right, you are going to have some really strong emotions and some really powerful thoughts while you go through the process. So anyway, you literally can Google a list of values. And if you can get a smaller list, that's probably better. Just like Google like 25 values or whatever. Find a smaller list, because the bigger the list, the longer it takes and the harder it is to do. So anyway, that is how I found my values. And I will tell you that it changed my life, and it helped me to not get burned out as often. I won't lie to you and say I never get burnt out. I actually just had to go on vacation because I totally got burnt out. But it's so much less than it used to be. So give it a try, find your values. If you're starting to recognize that a lot of what is filling your life right now doesn't actually align, and you're not sure how to start untangling that without creating more stress, okay, then that is something that we can work through together at Evolved Women's Health. And it is part of the work that we do here every day. Like I've mentioned before, we are not only a clinic for the physical body, we are also a clinic for the mental and emotional body. So we do have me, the health and fitness coach, but we also have psychiatric nurse practitioners, as well as therapists. So this really is the kind of work that we do every day. And if you want to get some help, you can start that process by going to evolvedwomenshealth.com, and you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation directly with me. And I can always get you to where you need to be. If it doesn't happen to be a health or a fitness issue, then I can get you where you need to be. Or if you prefer, you can always call or text 801-477-6484, and we will get you set up. So again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening, for sharing your limited time with me. And please, again, if this episode resonated with you, please do share it. Follow along, subscribe, whatever it is you're supposed to do. I don't know. What am I supposed to say? Like and subscribe and share, but especially share, because as women, we really do have to watch out for each other, especially in this political climate, because no one else is watching out for us. So if you have a friend or a loved one who could use this, who could benefit from this, please share so we can get health care for women to have better outcomes, because that's really what we need and what we deserve. All right, ladies, until next time, bye.